Is eating fish as sustainable as we think it is? The big question that we're trying to answer in today's episode. For a lot of people who have been trying to eat more sustainably, the idea has been passed around that eating fish is more sustainable than meat. But is that true? And if it isn't, how can we support a more sustainable fishing industry? The idea that fish is a more sustainable choice has long been chatted about around dinner tables, because fish doesn't come associated with the big carbon footprints or the land use issues of something like beef. And to a certain extent, this sort of makes sense. But fish comes with its own environmental challenges, and choosing the right kind of fish is really important to its sustainability. The United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization has estimated that 85% of marine fish stocks are either fully exploited or overfished. And this is a massive problem, not just because we like fish on the menu, but around the world, a fifth of the population, or roughly 1.2 billion people, rely on fish for their main source of protein and their livelihood. So my first question about all of this is what we meant by overfished. And basically it's when we take too many fish out of a population at any one time so they don't have a chance to bounce back, or taking fish out of a population so young that they don't get a chance to reproduce. And this happens because the demand for fish is really, really high, but also because there are loads of people competing to fish a limited supply. Overfishing doesn't just cause a problem for that particular species, but also all of the other marine animals who rely on that species for food. Around the world, there are quotas for how many fish you're allowed to catch. And just last year, the quota for how much cod you could catch in the North Sea was halved. But quotas really vary from country to country, and they can be difficult to manage. So at the moment, loads of fish species around the world are either endangered or at threat of extinction because of overfishing. There are a few other problems with the way that we eat fish in the UK. Firstly, despite the fact that there are 6,500 fishing boats that go out in the UK and catch 150 different species of fish, most people in the UK only eat 5. They're the ones that you probably recognise from supermarket shelves. So haddock, tuna, cod, salmon and warm water prawns. And our reliance on these species means that they're way more likely to be overfished. And if we don't manage their populations really carefully, then they're likely to disappear from our oceans and shelves altogether. There are a few other things to consider when we're looking at fish. So one is the reduction industry. At the moment, about 1 in 4 kilograms of every fish caught are reduced to make things like omega-3 pills and meals for agriculture. Looking specifically at those omega-3 pills and stuff like fish oils, which have been said to do everything from making us smarter to stop heart disease. But recently, a group of UK universities did some studies and found that they actually had no health benefits despite a booming $30 billion business. The one thing that scientists did agree on is that we need healthy fatty acids in order to live, but you can get these from eating fish or from things like nuts and seeds. And the next thing to consider is plastics. Lost and abandoned fishing gear makes up for a majority of the large plastics in the ocean. Around 640,000 tonnes of lines, pots, nets and traps are discarded or dumped in the sea every year, which weighs about the same as 55,000 double-decker buses. This is a problem because these plastics can act as ghost fishing gear, which can trap or entangle fish, and then they eventually break down into smaller and smaller pieces, which become microplastics.
My name's Graham Doswell. I'm a third generation fisherman working out of Eastbourne Harbour. The availability of fish is just not there. And so however sustainably we can fish, and we had done for generations without having any problems, I think now that the fish stocks are in quite a state, unfortunately. And on top of that, I guess there's, sea temperatures have warmed up, which mean that some of our stocks that we fish on have maybe moved or haven't had successful sort of spawning. Yet because we're only sort of small bit players in this fishing game, that it's a job, however sustainably we fish, to actually influence it.
And is that because there are more people who are trying to fish the water, or there are more people who want the fish?
Probably 10 years ago, we had serious quota problems where we had an unfair allocation of quota, so we were having to throw quite a lot of fish back at certain sort of seasonal times of the year where we catch maybe cod or sole. Now I think we really need to get a grip on the management of fish resources. So I catch herring for quite a bit of the sort of autumn winter, and whatever my quotas are, or however I do it, however sustainably I do it, there are up to sort of 10 factory industrial ships working out off of there, catching, hundreds of thousands of tons, while I do it, I'm not able to influence anything. We always use the sort of biggest mesh size possible to catch the sort of bigger fish. So if we're trawling, or if we're trawlers, say use like 80 mil, 85 mil mesh, we were using sort of 150, 170 mil mesh, and only catching and targeting the bigger fish, because with static gear fishing or whatever, it's a very labour intensive. So to make it easier, rather than getting 500 small fish out, it's better to get 20 big fish out, and that's sort of rough. It's only a broad, but it's a rough sort of principle that we always work on.
So my name's Chris Williams. I'm a senior program manager at NEF, which is the New Economics Foundation, which is a charity and think tank that works on social justice and environmental issues. Spent the majority of the first 8 years working on issues to do with fisheries, aquaculture and coastal communities. Fundamental problem in this country is that we have a very, very limited taste. There's this sort of huge imbalance between the huge variety of species that actually swim around UK inshore waters and the things that consumers actually buy. There's an abundance of extremely healthy and also sustainable seafood that can be caught in UK waters. Eating oysters or herring or things like that used to be an absolute staple for people in the UK, and I think that has sadly changed, and the way people consume is just different. People go to supermarkets and want squares of white protein. We've become sort of factory, sort of supermarket processed food people rather than wild food people. We really need to rediscover it and fall in love with it again.
We have got to a place where people are only eating this 5 fish, and whether it's because are we squeamish about a whole fish, or are we just used to seeing what we see on the supermarket shelves and don't realise there's more choice?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly both of those things, but I mean, it's also the same for crops, isn't it? We only eat, 5 main crops. Most of our agricultural area is 5 main things. The biomass of living animals is mainly like chickens and pigs and cows. I mean, it's how industrial food systems skew things towards monoculture. A system that basically provides a huge amount of cheap protein, whether that's, farmed or otherwise, seems to be the main objective of a food system, rather than something that is seasonal, sustainable, creates good jobs, is healthy, and basically contributes to our sort of struggle with adapting to climate change.
How do you think we can build a more sustainable fishing industry when there are so many different problems to fix all at one time?
Yeah, well, I think one of the main sort of take-home messages really about the fishing industry is that people like to imagine that the whole industry is people like Graham, who are sort of 3rd generation from a long heritage of fishing, live for it. The reality is the fishing industry is extremely diverse and heterogeneous. So you have some vessels that are absolutely massive, over 100 meters long, could catch over 100 tons a day, and are fishing off West Africa one week, in the Western Atlantic another, and then in the Channel another. These problems are sort of interlinked and complex and messy. You have to decide what is more important to you. Is it the price? Is it the species? Is it whether you're supporting a local fleet? Is it the health of the stocks it's coming from? Is it the risk of bycatch of other species? Is it, national, like caught in our waters versus imported? I mean, it depends what you prioritize, and people have their own sort of choices, their own sort of pressures and their own kind of values. I think we need to prioritize, those fishery dependent communities and ensure that we can basically support the people that are fishing in a low impact way and are fishing out of their local port, and not just focus on buying the cheapest seafood we can from industrial sources.
People maybe need to try. We've got so many wonderful fish out there that people don't really want to try or haven't tried. A lot of the fish that we catch is unfortunately exported, and we buy it. I guess we buy in the sort of Icelandic cod and haddock and stuff that everybody knows, or they see in those sort of frozen packets. So I implore people to try local, because there's so much out there that's really, really nutritious and worth trying.
Like with everything we look at on the channel, there are loads of different angles to look at it from, but if you still want to eat fish and you want to eat it sustainably, how do you do it? By choosing more sustainable fish in restaurants or in supermarkets, you're increasing the demand for suppliers that catch or farm fish in the most sustainable way. And there are a few really easy rules that you can follow. So firstly, look for the Marine Stewardship Council sticker on fish when you're in the supermarket. It's the most common certification out there, and it's a good place to start. A certification like this one isn't perfect and it won't be a magic bullet for sustainability. Like most things, it's an incredibly nuanced issue, and if you want to go further, supporting truly local, small-scale fisheries is the best thing you can do. Check how something is caught. Go for pole and line caught fish or potted caught marine life. Think a lobster pot. These are much more specific and environmentally friendly ways of fishing. Next up, ditch the omega-3 pills and use your diet to get the healthy fats that you need. And finally, mix it up a little bit. Swap out your salmon on a Friday for something like hake or rainbow trout or even rope-grown mussels, which are amazingly environmentally friendly because they produce protein 30 times more efficiently than beef. We've barely dipped our toes in, and this topic is as deep as the ocean. But I want to hear what you think about sustainable fishing and how we can protect our oceans for generations to come.